what is the city doing to make sure that all of its property is accounted for?
Well, the first thing we need to do is get all our records caught up and balance the books so we know exactly where we are. And that's what the staff is working on feverishly, and hopefully we'll have it done next week. The second thing is we need to have an inventory. One of the things I've been pushing for is an auction of unused or unnecessary city acquisitions. And this last fall we had, I think, a couple trucks and about 10 cars that we sold in an auction. We have 2 hangars full of city unused supplies, and we have a full hangar full of almost bicycles that we found. And we're going to have an auction this spring and get rid of some of those and return that money to the citizens through an auction. And I think a gross inventory of all the city properties is indicated. And I will, as soon as we get done with this financial balancing the budget and the budget, we will begin an inventory process early this year. Well, the way we would implement it is each division head, for example, Jerry Hamby would be responsible for everything in the street department and inventory that. Mark Webb, our police chief, would inventory everything in the police department and everything that's been found, not only in the evidence room, but for example, the bicycles that are either stolen or abandoned. The fire chief would be responsible for everything in the fire department, and likewise. And I think that's one of the things we need to work on and do a better job in. And again, I will emphasize that.
Do you think building the aquatic center was a mistake?
When I sat here, I guess 3 years ago, with Sarah Hilton, and she asked me that same question, and I said it'd been a lot better to build a $2 or $3 million facility than a 5.5 or 6 or 6.5. And the analogy I use is if you need a car and you're financially struggling, you might buy a used car, or you might buy a less expensive model like a Chevy or Ford. And I drive a Chevy, so I'm not downgoing Chevys. But you don't go out and buy a Mercedes 700 series, or you don't go out and buy a Lamborghini or a Ferrari, because that's not what we need. And in looking back on the records, and I've done a lot of research, talking to people that were on the board and talking to people at the Y and talking to citizens and reviewing the records, they thought the aquatic zone would bring business to town. It would bring people to come, visit, stay, swim, spend money, eat at restaurants. It would be an attraction. It didn't turn out that way. There were cost overruns, number one. Number two, there were change orders that we didn't know about. Number three, from the beginning, there was dispute on where to put the building. They originally were going to put it behind the Y, and there was conflict with the Polk County Library. Mr. Mersch really thought that having it on the highway on 32 would bring a lot of business and bring a lot of people to the facility and make it kind of a city icon. Unfortunately, I don't think he realized that when you build a building north of another building, you lose the opportunity to get convection heat from the south in the winter, because the sun is in the southern hemisphere and all the solar passive heat comes from the south. So that really failed that. I think he also failed to realize that heating a building with propane was even more expensive than natural gas. I think building it a 4-lane instead of a 6-lane instead of a 4-lane facility is a problem. Now, Mr. Mersch initially thought, well, let's build a 4-lane aquatic zone, and then he talked to the gentleman down at Ozark, the city manager, and he said, well, I wish we had 6 lanes because we need to host swim meets and we need 6 lanes for a swim meet. You don't make that much money from a swim meet. It's a great idea, but if we were having swim meets twice a week, you probably need a 6-lane facility, but not when you're not hosting meets, and particularly when you're closed in the winter, you really don't need it. And so the grandiose idea of aquatic zone is a great idea. It's just too expensive. We would have been a lot better off in retrospect having a $2 or $3 million outside pool that we could open in May and close in September.
Do you think it's fair for people to question the total cost of the pool, a $16.8 million total cost, as being exorbitant when compared to the same types of investments that are made on smaller bonds? Looking at the amortization, it's not out of the realm of reason for this facility to cost close to $17 million when all is said and done.
Well, first of all, again, I was not part of any of the process of the organization, the development, or the pre-construction phase. When you look at a house, let's say you're going to buy a house, you're getting married, and or Sarah's going to buy a house, or I'm going to buy a house, and you buy a $100,000 house, you can take out a mortgage. And over a 30-year period of time, you may spend $300,000, $350,000 for the house because you're paying interest. Is that a good deal? Well, probably, because you have the opportunity of using your money for other things. You're not putting all your salary into a building. You still got to live, you still have to have insurance, you have to have other things. And that way, borrowing money does cost. There is no question about borrowing costs money. We wouldn't have banks if we didn't have that. The problem is that in this particular instance, it can't be prepaid. In other words, we could go out and borrow money now since we have a better credit rating and pay off this loan, except it's not allowable until 2020. So we're stuck at this rate for a while. Second of all, I know what they were trying to do. They were trying to get Build America bonds, which were bonds that were in part supported, and the interest rates were decreased through government subsidies. And that's a great idea, except it locked you into a really difficult time period of 8 years or 9 years or 10 years at that rate of 8.5%. We're going to have to live with it. And unfortunately, the thing to learn from this is don't do it again. And that's one of the reasons why we're going to buy the JDC, the Juvenile Detention Center, at $500,000, a building that's worth 1.5 or 1.6, which will serve our fire department and our police department and help recruiting and retention of firefighters and policemen, so they don't have to work in a basement or a fire department that is really uninhabitable for men and women volunteers. It'll also help us not to have to have a new HVAC for City Hall when we go back in, and we won't have to spend money restoring and rebuilding the basement of City Hall. So it's I think a good financial decision, particularly since we've increased our bond rating from BBB plus to A minus, and we're able to get the money at 2.5%, which is about I think $3,300 a month that we're paying on the JDC. Now that's about $40,000 a year. Okay, $40,000 a year for our policemen and firemen is a great deal when you're spending $520,000 for an aquatic zone that's only open now probably 4 to 6 months. That's financial sense. So we've learned, I think everybody in town has learned, that you need to really think, why do we need this structure? What's its utility, and can we get it at a reasonable price, and how can we finance it?
What do you see the city's efforts in trying to market the Aqua Zone so that it doesn't become so they can get back to being a year-round pool instead of a 4 to 6 month pool?
Well, our Parks and Recreation Committee has been looking at this for several months, and I think one of the things we need to do is when we reopen it, we have extended hours, we lower the cost. I think it's untenable that a citizen of Bolivar has to pay for, number one, the debt on the building, number two, the operations on it, and then get charged $5 a day. I think that's excessive. I think we need to come up with a rate that's more reasonable for the families so they can swim. And I think we need to have increased hours of operation. That's number one. Ease of operation and consistent approach. It's just like a restaurant. You can't open a restaurant 2 days a week and make money. You have to have it open all the time so people get a pattern of using it. So that's number one, increasing hours. Increasing exposure. I think there needs to be billboards on the highway, come visit our aquatic zone. And we need to maybe run some ads in Springfield and surrounding areas, encouraging people to come. Another way we can do it is encourage people to rent it out for parties. It's a great place to have parties, birthday parties, etc. And so those are all opportunities for, I think, success.
Is there anything else that you would like to say as far as the audit, the state of the city, where you see Bolivar going 6 months from now, 3 months from now, a year from now? I say 3 months because the follow-up
Sure.
team will be back at that point.
I think in 3 months we will get a good report from the auditor. I don't think it'll be great. You can't fix everything in 3 months, but I think he will say that all the issues have been addressed, and he'll say most of them have been fixed or in the process of being fixed. I think we will continue to grow and become more financially solvent. I see our city hopefully expanding our fire department and having more firefighters so we have better fire protection. I see our city cleaning up the issues with the SWAT team and the unsolved cases. I see new businesses moving in. I've been in contact today with a new business that may be able to...
Can you tell us what it is?
No, I can't. You have to understand that people do not want, when they're in the preliminary stages, they do not want their ideas exposed. So that's just confidential. But I do think the city will grow and prosper, and I think you'll see a more active Board of Aldermen. I think the idea of having an auditor check everything, at least quarterly, is a great idea. And I think by evidence of what happened last night, I think you see a more active and not a passive Board of Aldermen. And so I'm encouraged. And Bolivar's a great town. It's got a great history, and I'm proud to be the mayor, and I'm encouraged. And I will tell you this, it reminds me of the story the other day, and I think I told this at the President's breakfast. I was out ringing the bell at Woods on Wednesday night, and a 91-year-old lady came in and said, "Sonny, don't worry, I'll be right back." And she went in and she came back with a brand new $100 bill. And I said, "Where did you get that?" And she says, "Oh, I just won $100 off Lotto." And I said, "Do you want to give this to the Salvation Army?" She says, "Yes." She says, "Don't worry about Bolivar. We're going to win." She says, "I've been here all my life." And she says, "We're going to turn this around." If a 91-year-old lady can have confidence, I can have confidence too. And we will turn this around.